So Natalie, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
Thank you, Nick, for the opportunity to talk to you today. I grew up in the wonderful city of Cape Town. I was born, bred and fed here. I've done businesses across South Africa, but I always come home to Cape Town.
And what was your dream career when you grew up?
So as a little girl, I always saw myself walking around with an attaché case, sort of a briefcase. And I've always wanted to be in public relations as a little girl, although when my parents tested me for my career, they thought that I should have been a vet. So very interesting that I followed my dream.
And tell us, who inspired you in your early days?
In my early days, it was probably my mum. She was a widow. My dad died when I was very young, and she was a very hardworking woman, and she had an incredible love for people. She's the kind of woman that would have spoken to anybody, and she also for her it didn't matter whether they were rich or poor or whether they were the man in the street. You know, to her, people were people, and she felt that there was always an opportunity to meet and find some sort of gem of wisdom in people. And I think she definitely did inspire me.
Now, Natalie, you studied extensively communication, political science, even an executive MBA. What is your best memory from your study days?
So probably the latest one I've done is the executive MBA, which I did at the Graduate School of Business, UCT. And I think what I realized there was the fact that you think you're a leader, and because I did it later on rather than straight out of school, I had a lot of time to run businesses and to realize that at the end of the day, I was not the leader that I thought I was. And what the executive MBA taught me is to peel away the layers of the onion and realize, to get to the core, there was a lot of tears and a lot of reflection, personal reflection that was done within the course as well as within my team. And there was a lot of revelation that came through.
Now, Natalie, you started your career at the Africa Indaba. In fact, I believe you spent 11 years at the Africa Indaba.
Yeah.
You were in charge of communications and marketing. Can you tell us a little bit of what exactly did that involve?
So communication and marketing. So Africa Indaba was an exhibition management company, and we started a couple of exhibitions across South Africa. And for me, it was one of the first exhibitions we started was a baby show. So to communicate to new parents was a very new thing. I was a new parent at the time, and I needed to find a voice of the mother that didn't understand what to feed her baby and why her baby was crying. But then by that, it meant that there was a whole new business that grew from that. Because I was a new parent, that sort of evolved into a business. And out of that sprung a whole bunch of things of how do you communicate. And for me, communication, I'm incredibly passionate about that. For me, it's how you speak, what your message says, not just the words you use. I think the tone of your voice is, for instance, very important. And I think the tone is what it taught me is how you say things in a message, even though they can't hear your voice. It's how you write things and what you're projecting, and it's so very important when you're building a brand that happens. So from that, I grew into. I went and worked for other companies as well, and again, it's about the messaging. Communication and marketing is how you do your messaging.
Yeah, and then you joined Westpro. Obviously, Westpro is the investment agency for the Western Cape. And can you tell us a little bit about your work at Westpro?
Yes. So I had a lovely career, a very short career, but a very short time with them, but I loved every minute of it. I joined the Convention Bureau, where we basically bring we would bring world congresses to South Africa and thereby particularly Cape Town. And my job there was to do the research and to find out what which of these congresses were lucrative. And then I joined the strategic projects, marketing projects team when we had that terrible water crisis in Cape Town. Yeah. And I was instrumental in finding the water app that we all, that people were subscribing to, and then basically making donations to save Cape Town's water. It was it's a first in the world, and it was one of the things that gave me a lot of joy and a lot of pride to be able to, being a Cape Townian, to help make a difference in the city I love so much.
And then, Natalie, you joined the YPO. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and about the YPO?
Yes. So YPO is a Young Presidents Organization. It's a business that was started in the United States. And my particular role was to look after marketing and communications and public relations for the Africa and the Middle East YPO members. And basically, the YPO members are all CEOs. They can only join under the age of 45, and they obviously have to have certain qualifying criteria. And I've met incredible men and women that are, in my opinion, selfless and amazing servant leaders. And it inspired me even more to look at my leadership journey through the people that are the members of YPO. And to this day, they're still doing amazing work, trying to sort out the COVID crisis in Africa, finding ways of how they can impact other people's lives, which is phenomenal.
So Natalie, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point, or maybe a number of turning points?
So I was an entrepreneur. I did entrepreneur, for a good couple of years, and there was leadership there. But I think the turning point for me was very much of looking inward and realizing if you want to be a good leader, you can't just project, because a lot of people think leaders are managers or managers are leaders, and that's definitely not the case. Probably I was more of a manager than I was a leader, but I found that my leadership skills have been enhanced as my career has advanced. And for me, the turning point probably was the executive MBA, which was a big turning point for me because I was in a class of 48 other leaders from across Africa and from France. And I was very blessed to be able to experience such a diverse leadership group on South African soil, and realizing also as a woman how we lead and how we manage ourselves and our lives. And I suppose it just made me more aware.
And Natalie, what would you say is driving you today?
What drives me today is my son. So our son was born 19 years ago, and he is an incredible, he's actually an Olympian because he climbs for South Africa. He's a rock climber, a sport climber. And for the first time, it was admitted into the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, but in 2018, he went to the Youth Olympics. And when I look at David, I realize that he gets up every morning with enthusiasm and pride in what he does. And with rock climbing, you just don't know if you're ever going to get to the top of the rock or you're going to get to the top of that climb. And he works very hard at it. And it makes me want to work harder. I think he probably has some of our, some of our DNA in that we're also quite driven people, but he's particularly driven. And I think we sort of reflect in a mirror. And I realized that looking at my son, I realized how much he's taught me.
So is he scheduled to go to Tokyo next year?
Well, he was a very strong contender to go to Tokyo this year. And of course now he's not, but yes, he's hoping to go next year.
So Natalie, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
So, Dr. Nick, for me, diverse teams and inclusive environments is what is very important. And I think if we upskill our team members, our employees, and we involve older employees, we can motivate people to help with their journey. I had a fantastic woman who walked into my life, Sue Gannon, some years ago, and she was an older woman. And I realized when I was starting this exhibition business that I knew nothing about it. And she turned to me and she said, I said, how much do you charge? And she said, you can't afford me, but I will help you. And I realized that she had insights and experience that I could never have in a million years because I just haven't walked her path. And she was just the most influential person in my life in terms of that particular business. And that's why I'm specific about involving older people in our business. You know, there's a lot of people that have incredible skills, but because they reach retirement age, people don't refer to them. And for me, that's incredibly important. And then just having a diverse teams. And when I say diverse, I talk about culture and gender. I talk about skills. For me, it has to be diverse. Otherwise, the future of leadership is going to look very bleak.
And looking back over your own journey, Natalie, what would you say is most important for building future leaders? What I mean is, what should we do more of to elevate the next generation of leaders?
So, Dr. Nick, for me, honesty is an enormous characteristic of any leader. And I think with honesty comes trust. So for me, it is also a very big gamble because just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you are honest or that people trust you. And I use the analogy that no one knows where you live. When you walk into a boardroom, no one knows which car you've just driven, but what you have is yourself. And if you project yourself to be an authentic and honest and truthful but humble person, that will come through in your leadership. And for me, it's so very important that no matter how hard the story is to tell, that one is always honest. Those are the kind of characteristics and values that I would love that our family, endorses. And I believe that is something that's part of my character.
And Natalie, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brands?
So for me, I absolutely believe that social media is a must. I don't believe that one can go through the world these days without having a social profile. I think it's very important that future leaders express opinion and that of their companies, and that they, at the end of the day, they share the activity or the action that they're going to take about a specific topic that they might be talking about. It's important that they share content on a regular basis. So for instance, if climate change is a big thing in your life, I think that's something that one should deal with. I tend to have leadership as a very big thing in my life, and I feel like every bit of information that I share often has to do with kindness and authenticity and leadership. I think it's very important to keep a very positive message. Doom and gloom is not what anybody wants to read. And I think in order to build your personal brand, you need to have your brand voice, your image, and your tone has got to be consistent. And I think very importantly, you need to create and curate engaging content so that people would want to follow you on social media. And that builds your personal brand as a leader.
And Natalie, what is your advice for future leaders in terms of some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
So I believe that the future leaders are going to have to anticipate and create change. I think business is changing rapidly, and I think it's escalating. I think globalization, shifting political landscapes, and environmental issues are all very challenging. I think people need to be aware of the change that's coming. I believe that as future leaders, that we have to stay agile, and we need to know that by sort of disrupting the status quo, we have to prepare for tomorrow. Today, we focus on execution with disciplined structures, and tomorrow we need to be more agile, curious, experimental. We need to adopt a new mindset. Tomorrow and today are in competition with each other, so we need to make sure that the future leaders must let go of control and start to lead with vision. That, I think, is very important. We need to mentor and build leaders by building the skills of our loyal workers. Often we will go outside to find somebody to come and lead our businesses. We need to actually start upskilling the people inside, these loyal people in our network. And we need to make sure that the people that we're talking to and teaching come from inside the company, because they often have, they're very strongly aligned with company purpose. Intergenerational collaboration, I touched on it ever so slightly when I mentioned about Sue Gannon. And I think marrying the younger and the older folks to collaborate and find opportunities, I think that's very important. I think we can learn from both. I believe the biggest or the fastest growing demographic at the moment are people over the age of 65. So technology and mobility currently doesn't matter where you work, you can still be very, very effective. And then, of course, to promote diversity and inclusion. For me, that is probably the most important thing, because it produces higher profit, a better return on human capital. We have to embrace culture, gender, skills, and generational mindsets. So for me, it's incredibly important that we make sure that those are the skills that we're going to have in order to go into the future of leadership.
Now, Natalie, if you were to design, yes.
If I may just add something else, which I believe is very important, are the soft skills. We've all got technical skills, but soft skills are very, very important.
Well, that brings us to the next question. Natalie, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some new skills you would want to factor in?
Okay, so I've jumped the gun there. So soft skills, very much. So everybody would sort of poo-poo the fact that people need to be a little soft. But as leaders, we don't have to go into battle every day. And to be creative and persuasive and adaptable, those are all very important things. Being collaborative. Something that has stood me in very good stead is emotional intelligence, how I communicate, how I listen, always being open-minded, having a curious mindset. Obviously, one has to network strategically, but something that's also that I find is very important, especially when you're having to communicate change and to motivate a team, is storytelling. Be a very good storyteller. Be aware of your cultural awareness and the fresh ideas that's coming through innovation because of the cultural diversity. Critical thinking, of course, very important if you want to solve a problem. Having a presence as a leader is incredibly, for me, I believe, very, very important, because when you walk into a room, you need to command the room. You need to have that it factor that people would want to listen and lead, follow you, and you would want to lead. To inspire and to grow a team is, those are leadership skills that one should have anyway. But something that touches also very much on, in my mind, on the emotional side, is the fact that one has to allow a team to feel psychologically safe. To feel safe and operate where people can raise concerns and challenges, have difficult conversations, they need to have that psychological safety net. And I think those soft skills will stand leaders in good stead.
Now, Natalie, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Thank you for asking. So Dr. Nick, I had a student who was virtually phoning me for 3 months every day saying she would like to come and work in my business. She doesn't need to be paid. She just wants to be there. Her name was Noma Kaya. And I was so irritated. I was on a deadline, and with exhibitions, there's a lot of moving parts. I eventually said, okay, just come. It's fine. Just come, and I'll pay you, internship. I'll give you an internship. Let's do this. Well, Noma Kaya turned out to be probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I think I probably increased her salary 4 times in 1 year. She was able to purchase herself a car. This was a person that was straight out of college. I handed over the baton to her, and I said I wanted her to become my exhibition manager. I'd never done that before. I eventually sent her out to go and do motivational speeches to people and open exhibitions and basically mentored her and allowed her to fly. And before I knew it, she was headhunted by somebody. And sadly, I lost her to Johannesburg. But it's what was the right thing for her. And she's still one of my LinkedIn connections and a very dear person in my heart. And I'm very proud of her. And I often refer to the story about this woman that wouldn't give up and was just probably the most loyal and most wonderful person I could ever have mentored in my life.
And Natalie, looking back over your own leadership journey, who are the role models of leadership that you came across and maybe in your learning journey that you would recommend future leaders should study?
So, I mean, you've touched on the charisma leadership not so long ago, last week. So Nelson Mandela, I happen to have I was very fortunate in meeting him. And the reason I feel that Nelson Mandela is such an incredible role model is because of the relationships that he was able to make. And I think leadership is about relationships. I think when it comes to storytelling, I would refer to Shakespeare. I think he was very good at doing that. And then there's the CEO from Pepsi, Indra Nooyi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She's the kind of person that people want to follow. I think she creates a vision, and she found the courage in her convictions, and she unleashes the power of people. She makes people want to become amazing. And those are the three people that I think should be studied.
Now, Natalie, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
So I'm quite active. I'm rather active on LinkedIn. I feel that is my business portfolio and profile, which I'm very active on. So on my LinkedIn profile is Natalie Naude, and people are very welcome to reach out to me, and I'm very happy to give advice.
And last but not least, Natalie, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own leadership?
Dr. Nick, I believe that to lead is a privilege. I think it is something we should never take for granted. I think when trust is broken, it very seldom gets replaced with anything or is ever healed. I think one has to be very gracious in accepting the fact that we've been given an opportunity to lead a team and to bring the best out. I think it's very important for us to see the future as present. And what I've done is I've got a set of values that I live by. And if I have to make decisions that go against those values, I won't. So knowing your values and living by them, I think, is very important. Being a disciplined thinker, so basically making sure that we observe our thoughts, because our minds can play tricks on us, and sometimes being a leader can be very lonely. So for me, to embrace an abundant thinking and have an authentic voice, and basically just, have this privilege of leading is something that I would want to leave with the community.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership, and reminding us that leadership is a privilege and that we need to constantly observe our thoughts and actions.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. I appreciate this.